Coming up, a new year but the same old economic worries for our economy. The foreclosure market is booming. Could housing woes close the door on the recovery? We'll look at my economic forecast, plus what's the outlook for the U.S. travel industry this year? It's time for Money Talks America. Yeah. Welcome to Money Talks America. I'm your host, Snaith, Director of the Institute for Economic Competitiveness in the College of Business Administration at the University of Central Florida. We kick off a new year of our program here at the UCF Arena, a place where thousands of students receive their diplomas each year. And this year, they'll march off into an uncertain labor market. My institute's forecast calls for unemployment to peak at nearly 11% within the next few months. But it'll take years for these jobs to return. A fact I'm calling political plutonium, with many incumbents succumbing to radiation sickness. Housing starts have bottomed out from historic lows, but I don't expect starts to even reach 2002 levels until 2013. Housing prices will also continue to fall during the next several quarters as the excess inventory is absorbed by the market. But there's also the question of the shadow inventory that's been sitting on the sidelines, some of it in the form of foreclosures. Joining me to discuss foreclosures today is Andy Tolbert, an expert in foreclosures and short sales. Andy, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
First of all, what is a shadow inventory?
It depends on the report you're looking at. There's actually two different shadow inventories that they're talking about. One is properties that have already been taken back by the bank but have not been released to the market for sale yet. And there's a big fear that if the banks dumped all of these on the market at once, it would obviously flood the market, and when you have more supply than you have demand, obviously prices will be driven even further down. But the second is we have properties that either are, I've seen as much as a year or two in default, but the foreclosure process has not even been started on them. Or what one attorney called file and park. They're filing the foreclosure, but then not pursuing the rest of the steps. So we have a lot of properties out there that will be a foreclosure at some point in time, but have not yet. So if all the attorneys actually started pursuing those, we would have a ton more.
So how does this play itself out? I mean, we have seen here in Florida that sales numbers have picked up significantly. And a lot of it, of course, not surprisingly, has been distressed properties. But I mean, how big is the shadow inventory? And in your expertise, how is this going to play itself out? Is it going to just be a dump truck of properties just flooding the market, or will banks let them trickle out slowly?
What I've seen is different banks are doing different things. There are some banks that the minute the foreclosure auction at the courthouse has happened, within a week they've already got an agent on it, getting it relisted, getting a sign in the yard, and selling it. But there's other ones that are sitting on them. I heard one lender is sitting on over 1,000 just in Tampa right now. So if they decided to release those, we have a problem.
Well, we won't get you to name any names here, but is there a difference between the types of banks that are choosing these different routes? Are they the smaller community banks that are holding back, or are they the larger regional banks that are more able to hold back on these things? Is there any distinction between which banks are doing which, or does it vary?
One of the problems that a lot of these properties aren't actually with a bank anymore. There are investment groups that were able to go in and purchase the defaulted paper at a deep, deep discount. They continue the foreclosure. They have so little money into them that even if they sell them for half of market value, they're still doubling their money. So they have no incentive to wait for the market to get better. They just want to get their money, get in, get out.
And is this behavior, in your opinion, slowing the recovery in the housing sector, or is this a necessary step in trying to get this market back into balance?
I think maybe a little bit of both. It is obviously causing problems. There's this big unknown of all these properties that might hit the market. However, if they did hit the market, we would feel the effects. So it's kind of a necessary evil that I think we have to have.
Now, policy, of course, has played a huge role in this recession and this financial crisis, and one of the things that the administration's tried to do is to help modify mortgages to step in and prevent foreclosures from happening. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. I've got my opinions, and I've shared it quite frequently about how effective this has been. But has this been beneficial at all to Florida, these programs?
In Florida, not so much. Some of the programs had limits on them, as, for example, as long as you didn't owe more than 105% of the home's current value. They've raised it, it's either 115 or 120 now, but most of Florida is 200% underwater. So 105 is not going to affect us at all. The problem is there's a few different types of modifications. There's one where they take all of the late payments that you owe and they spread it out. So what it actually does is it increases your payment for the next few years. And that's a problem. If they couldn't afford their payment, they definitely can't afford a $400 higher payment. So those are the ones that you're seeing default again within a year. And I know you've heard most of these are defaulting within the first year. Those are the ones I think are the biggest problem, where their payment went up, which, come on, if your payment goes up, what do you think is going to happen?
Right. Well, yeah, it shouldn't be surprising.
Yeah.
Now, another factor sort of weighing in here that we were discussing earlier was with the economy continuing to struggle, particularly with regards to labor markets and unemployment being in double digits, people losing their jobs and unable to pay their mortgage is sort of a traditional type of foreclosure. That's starting to be piled on top of these other, what you might call financial foreclosures that are happening just because of the way the mortgage was structured. How bad is that situation going, and is there any distinction between the two types of foreclosures, or did they all just go into this inventory, shadow or otherwise?
They're all processed basically the same through the system. We actually have 3 different kinds of foreclosures right now. We have the ones where a payment, maybe an adjustable rate mortgage reset and their payment's gone up. The second is they've had a decrease in income. And there's a whole third one, which I think they're calling it strategic default. People who either own one property or multiple properties are just making the decision that I don't want to pay on a property any longer that is 200% upside down, and it'll be 10, 15, 20 years before I even break even. So then the whole third layer is people who are just making the decision to walk away. In the past, we've never had that. In the past, foreclosures were pretty much blue-collar workers lost their job, couldn't afford the house. But now we have 3 different kinds. We have the adjustable rate resets, and the decrease in income, and the people who just make a decision to walk away. So it's a different market.
It's very interesting. Now that third group there, and you mentioned, here in Florida, so many of us are so far underwater in our mortgages. I'm afraid we'll get the bends when we come out of this thing. But what is your advice to someone that is so far underwater in their mortgage? Is this strategic walking away the thing to do versus a short sale, or do you just ride it out for 10 years and hope that you can break even at that point? What do you suggest?
It depends a lot on their situation and what their goals are. If it's the family home that they want to keep, you keep paying. Eventually you're going to get back, you won't be underwater anymore. But that's the long-term solution. The first thing I always recommend is call your lender and try for a modification. As you've said, most people aren't getting them, but at least try. That's the good first step, the first effort. And when I'm working with clients, if they can get a modification, that's what I want them to do. The problem with a modification, though, is if they lower your payment now by a couple $100, that helps you now. Mm-hmm. But what if next year you lose your job, or next year you get transferred, you're still $150,000 in the negative, and then you're going to be a short sale or a foreclosure at that point anyway. So what a lot of people are doing is they're sitting down and looking and saying, yeah, I could do a modification, but we know we don't want to be in this house long term. 2-3 years, they start to have kids, they need a bigger house. So they say, we're better off just selling it now as a short sale, taking the hit to our credit. The sooner we do it, the sooner we're on the road to recovery. So 2 or 3 years down the road, we can try again.
Just rip the Band-Aid off quickly. Let me ask you this, just one quick question, and we could talk all day about this situation, but if you're making an inquiry to your lender, to your bank about a modification, does that show up on your credit report? I mean, is that somehow a scarlet letter that's going to appear that you were asking about this?
I don't believe just that you're asking would show up on the credit report anywhere. They are actually trying to change the way that short sales and probably modifications are reported to the credit bureau. So there's some changes happening right there.
That's great.
as we speak.
Andy Tolbert, thanks for joining us today. You're going to be a busy woman, I suspect, over the next several years, and we appreciate all the help you're giving to homeowners across the state.
Thank you.
No foreclosures in the entertainment industry, but plenty of consolidation. The year ended with Comcast merging cable channels worth $7.25 billion with the NBC Universal assets valued at $30 billion. The deal gives Philadelphia-based Comcast the USA, CNBC, MSNBC, and Bravo cable channels, NBC's broadcast networks and stations, a film studio, and the Universal amusement parks. Universal had major news of its own that will come to fruition in just a few months. The park is investing $250 million into the wizarding world of Harry Potter. Our Jenny Dunn gave us a preview.
Located within Universal's Islands of Adventure, the wizarding world of Harry Potter will span more than 20 acres, complete with restaurants, interactive shops, and of course, incredible attractions, all aimed at completely immersing guests in the scenes they know so well from the Harry Potter films and books.
Now we're taking what was created for the books and films and transforming it into a real place where people can touch, taste, and experience Harry's world. It's been great to be part of making it all come alive.
That includes making a stop at Ollivander's Wand Shop, where, in a magically interactive experience, guests will look for their very own wands. Or should I say, their wands will pick them, just like Harry in the movie. For the thrill seekers, there's no shortage of twists and turns as they take on the Dragon Challenge, inspired by the Tri-Wizard tournament in the film. The challenge is not one, but two high-speed roller coasters. Then, at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, it's fun the whole family can enjoy as you take to the skies in the flight of the Hippogriff over Hogwarts.
I've never heard or seen anything like this before. I think it's going to be completely unprecedented, and it's just really going to be amazing.
Of course, a visit to Harry Potter's world would not be complete without Hogwarts Castle, which will appear to ascend several hundred feet into the air. As the marquee attraction in Potter's Park, guests will enter through the iconic gates into Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. Using new, state-of-the-art technology, fans of the films will find themselves literally experiencing their favorite scenes and stepping inside those famous rooms.
Kids all the time come to the set and they're obviously eyes wide open and they're absolutely amazed. And that isn't a fraction of what you guys have created here. So I as a fan myself, I'm blown away. I can't imagine what people who have never seen anything to do with Harry Potter are going to be like. It's going to blow some serious minds.
For Money Talks America, I'm Jenny Dunn. Sean, let's send it back to you.
Thanks, Jenny. The Comcast deal, including Universal, will rival the heft of its former takeover target, Walt Disney. Disney, too, announced a major makeover of some of its iconic rides, among them Star Tours, which will be shuttered throughout this year in preparation for a reopening in 2011. By definition, the recession may be all but over, but Joe Battipaglia, market strategist for the private client group at Stifel Nicolaus & Company, is sticking to his prediction for us that the effects will linger for years to come.
Unfortunately, America is going to pay this price. We're going to pay it in terms of a slower growth in our economy for some time to come. You're going to pay for it in lower rates of return on common stocks. And perhaps the last 30 years of extraordinary performance of financial assets is now a thing of the past. And so you're going to have to struggle now to get a rate of return on your passive investments. So Americans are going to have to work harder, save more, and expect less from their government. If the government insists on pursuing more plans to provide more safety nets, you're going to move towards a more non-capitalist, non-competitive environment, which makes America a less interesting place to invest in the world scene. And this is not the time in history to make that turn, in my judgment.
Despite the gloomy outlook, if you've got some extra money, there have been some positives in the form of bargains. We talked about housing earlier, but the travel and vacation industry has also been hard hit. There are plenty of deals to be had. Joining us from Los Angeles is Gabe Sagley, senior editor for the web-based Travel Zoo. As the economy worsened and people cut back, 2009 was a tough year for the travel industry. Is 2010 looking more promising?
Well, I think that all of this will depend really on consumer habit. Talking to a lot of the resorts across the country, they are not thrilled with what they're seeing currently for the first several months of 2010. The consumer behavior really shifted considerably over the summer months of this year, and really we're seeing this very sort of last-minute, impulse-driven decision-making when it comes to travel. Hotels hate that. They don't get the bookings several months out that they like to see for obvious reasons. So we're dealing with consumer habits that have shifted. Consumers looking for great last-minute deals. Sometimes the price tag alone is enough and is all they need to really motivate the travel. But those price tags have had to come down pretty low to entice travelers. So currently, the short answer is probably not in the first several months of 2010. I think as consumers, if in fact we see the economy begin to be just more of a positive reality in people's lives, and people become more comfortable with spending money on travel, not that's immediate, but perhaps several months down the road, perhaps by the middle to the latter half of 2010, we'll start to see a more measurable rebound.
One advantage of the downturn was there were bargains galore. Will it still be a buyer's market?
Indeed, I think in fact that's exactly true. I mean, the summer of 2009 will go down as the great airfare deal season, and I think that we'll still continue to see deals on the airfare front, perhaps more of the short-lived, perhaps web-only kinds of deals. I think airlines will become a little bit more creative in how they reach a more potentially viable market. But I think that the airfare deals will continue. Airlines have now learned how to gauge availability several times a day, and so we're seeing these sort of last-minute deals even for busy holiday periods. On the hotel front, certainly expect the deals to continue because both leisure and business travel has slowed to the point where even your high-end hotels in large cities are offering some great deals.
Airlines were cutting back or eliminating routes and charging fees for bags and other services. Is that a trend here to stay, or do you expect to see competition from airlines like Southwest, for example, to keep that in check?
Yeah, I think for now, and at least into the first half of 2010, we'll continue to see very aggressive competition on the fares front. I mean, we'll still see these sales out there, particularly after the holiday season. I think we'll start to immediately see sales promoting travel for spring break, spring in general. Even I think we'll probably see an unusually early push for even summer airfare buying as well. But these fees are here to stay at least for a while. The fact is that airlines make a lot of money on these fees. It's what allows them to keep fares themselves very, very low in some cases, because they know that once you buy your ticket, there are going to be a lot of fees that may be unavoidable. On top of that list is the checked baggage fees. People who haven't traveled in a while are now dealing with $40 to $50 each way per passenger to check 2 bags through. So for a family of 4, that can oftentimes be, you're paying more on the baggage getting checked through than you paid for your airfare. Same thing on the other side of the security gate. Things like what you drink, what you eat, creature comforts like pillows and blankets, headphones. These are all things that carry a price tag, and people, I think, are learning to circumvent these fees by fending for themselves a little bit, bringing your favorite snacks on board with you, sticking with the middle seat because that might mean a $30 savings over the aisle seat. We're giving up perhaps some of the luxuries and comforts that we used to get for free for the sake of saving some money. But the fees themselves, again, because they generate so much money for these airlines, are going to be a part of the flying experience for at least a while.
There were major announcements at all the major theme parks. Disney is revamping some of its iconic rides. Universal is adding the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, while SeaWorld and other Anheuser-Busch properties were sold. How will this impact family vacation decisions in 2010?
Yeah, well, family travel is a major, major component, big money maker for the travel industry. As budgets tightened in 2009, we saw people perhaps shying away from a lengthy trip to an amusement park, or at least shortening those vacations, oftentimes foregoing that sort of vacation and doing more of a cultural, regional, drivable staycation type of getaway with the kids. It's easier to pack them in a car and save money that way than getting on a plane and traveling to Orlando or Southern California to a theme park anywhere in the country. However, the theme parks are smart enough to know that again, if people are going to give in on the idea of not spending on travel, it'll be when it comes to that family vacation. If you're going to give up a business trip, a romantic getaway, you probably are not going to want to give up a trip that is going to create family memories and great pictures to share with the family years down the road. And so these sort of family-driven vacations, I think, will become much more heavily promoted. There will be specials that coming from resorts, perhaps, that we don't usually see sales coming from. 2009 saw Disney, for example, on their cruise ships offering sailings for kids for free with a paid adult. Disney has never done that kind of an offer before, and I think we'll continue to see that in 2010. More imaginative, more creative, and certainly more family-driven, because that's certainly a market that where there's at least some wiggle room, the thinking is, when it comes to splurging a little bit during tough economic times.
Gabe, thanks for your insight, and good luck to you and Travel Zoo.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
While travel from overseas benefits from a weak dollar, the greenback has been one of the many pitfalls of this economic recovery. With the Federal Reserve plowing trillions of dollars into the financial pipeline, the dollar has been appreciating during the financial crisis. This is a trend that's soon going to reverse itself. I think it's a function of reckless fiscal policy that ensures by the end of our forecast, the dollar will continue to depreciate, testing some of its record lows. There's also a significant concern about the potential for inflation in the economy. Our Ed Highland is here with a look back at a prediction that does not bode well for consumers.
Not at all, Sean. Economist Sally Chen with fixed income investment firm FFT&W was on the money. With her projection, GDP would show growth starting in the third quarter. We caught up with Sally during a conference for the National Association of Business Economists. Sally was also correct in predicting the big rebound in the stock market. Will she also be right in saying the U.S. will be dealing with up to a decade of deflation?
Now, the shape of yield curve, if you look at what we call yield spread between the 3-month bill rate and the 10-year coupon yield, that spread, that shape of the yield curve is actually a very useful indicator of recession. We have a model in-house that uses this yield spread as a forward-looking indicator, predicting will there be a recession or not a year down the road. Now, that spread these days, today, it's roughly about 200 basis points. It's slightly flatter than the historically steep level we saw in November of last year, but it remains fairly steep. And what that means is this. Traditionally, when you have an inverted yield curve, short rate higher than low rate, that has been a very good indicator of recession. And in fact, it predicted the past 7 recessions as defined by NBER. Now at 200 basis points, what's telling us is, despite all the gloomy news out there, that's actually suggesting that 12 months down the road, the probability of recession is fairly low. It's less than 10%. So some silver lining out there.
But does that not give us a mixed signal in the sense that we have perhaps a lesser chance of a recession, but a greater chance, if we were looking at some of the other data that you're relying on, of a deflationary environment, which is also not good for our economy?
Right. This is where, as an economist, I will say, where economic analysis really comes in, and this is where it's useful to provide some context, some baseline for market analysis. And I would say, in terms of break-evens, what's suggesting that, as I mentioned earlier, that market has been befuddled by some liquidity concerns. When you have an environment in which investors are very risk averse, as we saw towards the end of last year, they tend to flee these kind of markets and dive into safer haven assets such as nominal treasuries, which is what people are comfortable with, and specifically treasury bills. And when you have that sort of movement from investors, TIPS break-evens tend to actually provide a signal that's not entirely accurate or clear. So that's why I mentioned earlier that be careful when you don't rely entirely on break-evens as a gauge for inflation. That said, if I just step back a little bit and scan at the policies and the economic landscape, I do have to say that I think on some levels I am optimistic in terms of the outlook further out. Now, part of the reason is, again, historically, if you look at just the trajectory of growth, when we have recessions, we tend to recover fairly swiftly. And when we have deep recessions, we tend to have pronounced rebounds, precisely because after periods of severe contraction of investment and spending, there's tremendous pent-up demand. And consumers and businesses tend to respond to whatever incentive they have and act accordingly. They are rational on a lot of levels, despite what we say.
Now, you hate to say time will tell, but that's kind of what you have to do with these very long-range views. However, so far she has been right in line with your IEC quarterly forecasts.
Thanks, Ed. I'll be back in just a few moments with my final thoughts on that and a few more predictions. Welcome back. As we begin a new year, it's worth taking a few moments to look back at 2009. In 2009, we saw the worst part of this recession. The first 3 months of the year, GDP declined by over 6%. In response, we saw dramatic policy action. We saw the federal government pass a nearly $800 billion stimulus package, 80% of which has yet to hit the economy. We also started to see signs of the housing market recovering. Sales actually started to increase after almost 2 years of declines. There was some bad news as well at the end of the year. The unemployment rate continued to rise and hit double digits. Here we are in 2010. The recession most likely is over. The recovery, however, is going to be muted. We've described it in previous shows as a gravy boat recovery. Like a gravy boat, the recovery will be gradual, tapered. We won't see the sharp recovery like some analysts are predicting in the form of a V. Although I don't think we'll see a double dip either. I think we'll see a slow trudge out of a very deep hole. Labor markets, unfortunately, are going to remain the ugly scar that will be slow to heal and be there as a reminder of the economic trauma that we've been through. I expect that double-digit unemployment will be persistent, and it will take some time for it to come back down. We also expect that the Federal Reserve is going to have to act to undo much of its monetary policy. The increase in the money supply was dramatic, and interest rates were cut down to effectively zero. I expect that in 2010, we'll see the Fed begin to reverse course. Regardless of what happens, we'll be here to cover it and to present it to you on Money Talks America.